Years later, when I searched for that cursed house on Google Street View, my blood ran cold. There it was. The same house my friend Sarah had described in terror. And hanging from the front gate, tied with rope like some twisted ritual offering, was the exact same doll she had seen that day. The blue dress was faded and torn by years of weather. The purple hair had lost its vibrant color. But it was unmistakably the same doll that had haunted her nightmares. The doll that a strange man had been carrying when he grabbed her arm in broad daylight. Let me tell you how this all started. I grew up in Tokyo but now live in a rural area. Sometimes I feel nostalgic and use Google Street View to look at my old neighborhood, my school, and the places I used to visit. It's bittersweet to see how much has changed. The donut shop where I used to stop after school is now a real estate office. The cafe where I spent countless hours with friends remains exactly the same. While browsing these familiar streets online, I remembered my college friend and the conversations we used to have at that very cafe. That's when a chilling memory came flooding back, a story that had unsettled me deeply when I first heard it. My friend Sarah lived with her parents in Saitama Prefecture. In Japan, Saitama is a suburban area north of Tokyo, known for its residential neighborhoods and long commutes to the city center. Every day she traveled 2 hours each way to reach our university in Tokyo. Her journey involved taking a bus, then JR trains, Japan's major railway system, then private railways, and finally another bus to campus. Despite the exhausting commute, Sarah chose to live at home. As an only child, her parents preferred she stay with them, even when she had to return home late at night. Sarah's family lived in a rural area about 30 minutes by local bus from the nearest major station. By the time I get home it's pitch black, she used to joke. The few streetlights just make everything look more creepy. Near Sarah's house was a small residential development. In Japan, these planned communities are called new towns. They were built during the country's rapid economic growth period in the 1960s and 70s. This particular development seemed mostly abandoned now. It had a small, dimly lit market that looked like it hadn't been open for business in years. Sarah often cut through this area because it was a shortcut from the bus stop to her family's house in the older part of town. The houses all looked similar, creating a maze-like feeling. In the evening darkness, she frequently got lost and ended up in unexpected places. During these wrong turns, Sarah kept passing by the same disturbing house. It was covered with countless dolls hanging from strings. The windows, balcony and eaves were decorated with dangling figures. Even the garden trees, rusty clotheslines and gate posts had dolls tied to them with rope. Sarah was too frightened to look directly, but from the corner of her eye, she could see the variety was enormous. Traditional Japanese dolls, Western dolls in dresses, stuffed animals, plastic toy figures. They were all there, swaying gently in the breeze. Sarah first noticed this house when she was in middle school. Over the years, the number of dolls kept increasing. Just last week when I got lost again, there was a brand new doll sitting on top of the mailbox, she told me with a shudder. It startled me so much. Sarah would occasionally update me about changes to the house. We would both feel unsettled by her reports, but somehow talking about it made us feel better. We would exaggerate our fear and laugh together, as if that could ward off whatever dark energy surrounded that place. Then one day, Sarah was absent from university for several days. When she finally returned, I asked if she had been sick. She said she wasn't ill, but she looked tired and anxious. After our classes ended, we naturally found ourselves at our usual cafe, sitting across from each other at our regular table. I could tell something was bothering her. Sarah leaned forward and beckoned me closer. When I moved near the table, she began speaking in a frightened whisper. About a week earlier, Sarah had been able to leave campus early due to a cancelled lecture. She made her usual 2-hour journey home and got off at her local bus stop. Normally by that time, the area would be dark with only scattered streetlights creating an eerie atmosphere. But that day it was still bright outside. The suburban landscape looked peaceful and ordinary. Feeling relaxed, Sarah decided to take her usual shortcut through the new town development. She was walking along cheerfully when she realized she was standing in front of the dollhouse. In the sunlight, the dolls looked somewhat creepy but not as frightening as usual. Her curiosity got the better of her, and she found herself staring intently at the display. She even looked up at the second floor of the house, and walked around the entire block, pretending to be out for a casual stroll. Sarah noticed that the dollhouse had probably been built around the same time as the other houses in the development. It had white walls and a red roof. The balcony railing had an elegant curved design. The garden landscaping showed that care had once been taken with the property. It must have been quite a charming feminine house when it was first built, Sarah thought. These normal residential features only made the current state more unsettling. While Sarah was wandering around examining the house, a man suddenly appeared behind her and grabbed her arm forcefully. The daytime new town was nearly deserted. There were no people on the streets, and most houses appeared empty. Sarah had assumed the dollhouse was also unoccupied, so she had let her guard down completely. Frozen with shock and unable to make a sound, Sarah watched as the man who had grabbed her arm was moving his mouth, trying to say something to her. I'm sorry, Sarah whispered repeatedly, backing away and trying to get him to release her arm. She was terrified that he might have a weapon. When she looked at his other hand, she saw he was holding a doll. It was wearing a blue dress and had purple hair. Sarah realized he had been in the process of adding a new doll to his collection when he spotted her. In her panic, she suddenly exclaimed, "Ah!" louder than she intended. The sound startled the man, and his grip loosened. Sarah broke free and ran away as fast as she could. The man made no attempt to chase after her. He simply let go and stayed where he was. But Sarah didn't look back even once. She ran all the way to the main road where the bus stop was located. During her entire escape, she couldn't stop thinking about the doll the man had been holding. The blue dress and purple hair were burned into her memory. Even now, as she was telling me the story, she said that creepy doll was all she could think about. Sarah couldn't remember much about the man's appearance. She only recalled that he didn't seem particularly young. Everything else was a blank. She was so exhausted by the experience that she didn't tell her family what had happened. She didn't think it was serious enough to report to the police. I was the first person she had told. After finishing her story, Sarah sighed deeply. Tears appeared in her eyes as she relived the fear, but she said she felt better after sharing it with someone. She returned to her normal self for the rest of our conversation. However, from that day forward, Sarah never mentioned the dollhouse again. She also stopped talking about the new town area entirely. I noticed she seemed to avoid movies featuring dolls, and even art exhibitions that might include doll displays. Eventually we graduated from university. I moved away from Tokyo for work. Sarah also left Japan and moved overseas. After graduation, the area around Sarah's family home has been heavily developed since then. I often wonder what happened to that old new town development. As I mentioned at the beginning, I sometimes use Google Street View to see how places from my past have changed. After remembering Sarah's story about the dollhouse, I decided to search for it online. I didn't know the exact address, but since Sarah had used that area as a shortcut, I knew it was somewhere between her bus stop and her family's house. I looked for an older planned residential area in that location using satellite view. The area around Sarah's family home had indeed changed dramatically. Where there used to be fields and rice paddies, there was now a large suburban shopping mall. A new bypass road had been built with colorful restaurants and cafes lining the street. Nearby was a stylish apartment complex, with its own park, the kind that appeals to families with children. A little distance away I found what appeared to be the old development. It was laid out in a grid pattern just as Sarah had described. About half of the former new town had been cleared and turned into empty lots, but sandwiched between two vacant areas, I could see one house with a red roof. It was old and weathered, but definitely had a red roof. When I zoomed in, I could see something whitish that might have been a balcony. There seemed to be vine-like objects wrapped around it. I switched to street view to get a closer look at the building. What I saw made my blood run cold. The same chilling sensation I had felt when Sarah first told me about the dollhouse came rushing back. There it was. The dollhouse. Just as Sarah had described, it was covered with densely hanging dolls, creating an otherworldly atmosphere. The number of dolls seemed to have increased over the years. They were strung between garden trees like festival banners, but what made my heart pound and took my breath away was seeing a familiar figure among the dolls in the street view image. There was the doll with the blue dress and purple hair. The blue dress was sun-faded and tattered. The purple hair had lost its vibrant color. But it was unmistakably the same doll Sarah had described. A wooden beam had been attached to the center of the gatepost. For some reason, that particular doll was tied tightly around it with rope, making it stand out prominently from all the others. It looked like it had some ritualistic significance. I held my breath and stared at this bizarre scene for a long time. I have never told Sarah about this discovery. But sometimes I wonder, why was that one doll treated differently from all the other? Why was it bound so tightly to that post, like some kind of offering or punishment? And most disturbing of all, what would have happened if Sarah hadn't been able to break free that day? The dollhouse still stands there, unchanged by time and development. The man may still be adding to his collection, and somewhere in that maze of dangling figures, Sarah's story continues to hang in the balance. What do you think? Was Sarah just an unlucky witness to a harmless but eccentric hobby? Or did she narrowly escape becoming a permanent part of that twisted collection herself?